What are the Dark Ones? The Archons, the Nephilim, the Globalists? We've all heard of these. And it is plain to see that our world has a dark shadow cast upon it. Corruption, manipulation, conspiracy, and war have been so common throughout human history that it seems to be a part of human nature. But is it truly human nature to fall into corruption upon receiving power? To become one of these Dark Ones? Or are greater forces at work here? Think about it for a moment. Why is it that those unafraid to get dirty rise to the top? Is there some kind of connection between evil and power? What is causing this disbalance? And why do morals tend to hold good people back? Is there truly a shadow cast over this world that rewards evil? So now, it is more important than ever to shed light, shed awareness on what the Dark Ones and this shadow is, why they manifest, and what part of reality they are connected to. For it is a stark truth that those with the power to deceive, those who are inclined towards an archontic nature, are the most likely to obtain power in a world that leaves evil in the dark. Before we can reach an answer, we need to understand what the Dark Ones are and why they are persistently in power. It is vitally important that we understand their nature and why they exist in these times. In the past, we could be ignorant, looking away from the depths of the void, the darkness man is capable of, and the strange overarching shadow that seems to be cast on the world. In the past, we could safely ignore this and live our lives by moving away from corrupted centers of power. There was space, and humans were disconnected from each other enough that the full power of the shadow couldn't really manifest in human society. Wars, exploration, and decentralized markets acted as a bit of a buffer against the centralized power.
Where this shadow would be, for it could better manipulate man where power is centralized. In a small village, each man would know the other, preventing most corruption and misuses of power. But where there are too many to know, communication breaks down into disharmony, slowly wearing away at human understanding. Liars can no longer be easily caught. Psychopaths roam free, and the shadow chooses its champions. These ignorant champions, by the very nature of having a power hidden from truth, have no choice but to oppress and deceive to maintain it. This has happened throughout all of human history, to a degree, but was generally balanced by the fact that most lived in rural communities, small enough to understand each other.
In the current time, humans are far too connected, and there's not enough space. And the many great societies that we have are great societies that each have a shadow looming over. And in this very situation that we find ourselves, we also know that these nations have world-ending technology. The Archons, Nephilim, or Dark Ones are a force of limitation, manipulation, and entrapment. They manifest as the shadowy elite running world-scale corporations and governments. George Soros, Klaus Schwab, and the like are obvious examples, but most major ones you have never heard of. They control from the shadows. You may have heard of this kind of thing from sources like David Icke, or perhaps through studying Gnosticism, where the more esoteric theory of the Dark Ones originate. And Gnosticism is a good place to start in order to truly understand the shadow and the types of people I just named. Gnosticism is a Buddhist-like Christian theory that accepted the world is that of suffering, and that the God Yahweh himself is a jailer, called the demi-urge, who keeps humanity entrapped through a system of fear and distrust. They interpreted Yahweh as a God who keeps mankind obedient, docile, and in a slave-like mindset, unable to self-flourish, working for their masters, humble and chaste. The Gnostics believe that the God Yahweh hijacked the image of the true God, the central point and natural creator whose very existence itself proliferates the universe into being. The true God that many of our ancient ancestors tried to convey to us through story. But evil, oh evil, never makes anything of its own, only manipulating what already is, altering it as needed. Would the God of all that runs through all things, the eternal flux and light, have a chosen people? Would he destroy cities and murder thousands, and punish those who worshipped false idols? It is very unlikely that the God of all would care about humanity so much as to do that. The God of all wouldn't need to do anything, By his own nature, and thus the nature of the universe, those that go against God simply injure themselves. We are within God, so it would be the definition of self-destruction to go against God. Like a tumor that only causes death and destruction by going against the full system of the body. Sin would be naturally punished, as we do see over time happening to those that rise, only to fall under the weight of their own mistakes and wrongdoings. However, there is an archontic system of political and corporate power that protects evildoers, and even, the way the system is, sets up psychopathic, fear-based individuals who are against natural law to succeed. Is this because the Gnostics were correct? That the God of our world is a corrupted version of the true God? Is this the shadow? Let us continue at this from a logical angle. Why do the worst politicians always seem to rise to the top? Why are nearly all the most powerful corporations designed to maximize profit at the expense of the people? And I might add to that, companies who try to look out for the health or well-being of the customer usually fail. Why? Our society and years of human conditioning have created an environment designed to reward this behavior. Consumers want their baser desires satiated more than their higher, and voters prefer sweet lies rather than hard truths. An archontic tumor has metastasized and taken hold of the head of our society, such that backstabbing, lack of empathy, manipulation, lies, and ruthless action is what can bring someone to the highest echelons of power. In other words, demonic activity that directly conflicts with the natural law of the universe is what our society promotes. And it is all our fault, the fault of the majority who in ignorance promoted such a system. Just think about it. Lying, cheating, and stealing are very useful powers that only evil people utilize. And while there are counterbalances such as trust, truth, and community, if an evil person is intelligent, they can use both powers in good timing, and rise easily above those with petty things like morals. If the world is designed like this, while it is man's fault for being too ignorant to transcend this, it must also be caused by a force beyond man that shaped the world this way in the beginning. If you can understand that logic, then what follows are two conclusions which can be made from understanding this. One that is natural and positive, and another that invokes a cosmic sense of terror. The first is that this archontic force is merely an aspect of the true God, a demonic counterbalance that naturally places more and more limitation on man as he grows in order to test him and present challenges so that man may overcome and grow in his consciousness and strength. Imagine a figure blocking out the sun, but you had never seen the sun before and you don't know what is being blocked. However, you see light, small rays flowing around the edges, hinting at the greater light beyond. If the figure moves and lets in all the light at once, it would be far too much. It will blind you, ironically plunging you further into darkness. But should the figure slowly be overcome, chipped away, as we slowly search for more light, at the time we overcome it, we would be ready to feel the sun in its full glory. In other words, it is a necessary block to our full potential, and a lesson that teaches us through hardship and pain the lessons we need to be wise enough to handle our true potential. But would such a natural force built into the universe cause evil and plot total control? No. The hardships of society and reality teach us plenty. I believe this force has fallen out of its proper place and has metastasized, currently attempting to take control of its host. Dark ones create layers of ignorance, traps of manipulation, that keep us from rising and bettering ourselves. For example, a system of federally controlled currencies ripe for manipulation, or perhaps a system of feel-good pharmaceuticals that easily addict and don't treat the root of the issue, or perhaps a political system that tends to gain more attention and funding when they are fighting for some cause that pits people against each other, or, even worse, causes war between nations. And it is all too easy for us to play along. It would take a lot of effort to change it. And do we even want to? Why isn't peace profitable for politicians? Why is war more profitable? It is because we have set up the system that way, and the system is this way because we focus on our fears more than anything else. We are willing to fund it with our taxes, and say little about peace, because the other side surely isn't interested in peace, right? This way of thinking and system has been in place for so long that most unconsciously support it by getting involved in the fight, and enacting lower emotions like fear and anger. Why don't we have a system that rewards healing and psychological growth? Because the system is set up so that quick, pleasurable fixes are rewarded rather than the painful process of true healing. We have also been in such a system for so long that it is almost unthinkable to change it. A large majority of humans are afraid of the growth and discipline to health that healing would require, and so buy the cheap temporary fix, thus enforcing the very system that worsens their health. And what better to do to make money than promote sugar and high fructose corn syrup, alcohol, and grease, in order to ensure that one day the people will need drugs just to not feel the pain of their own bad health. And thus more wealth is funneled to the plottists, the dark ones. And lastly, why don't corporations seek to serve and provide solutions to problems, enhancing the lives of others? Well, actually, some businesses do, and this is a field that is not in complete archontic control. There are still wealthy business owners who follow natural law. However, for the most part, the top businesses make money through base things. Sex and conflict sells in the media like none other. Addictive video game phone apps have higher profit margins than true, deep works of video game art. And what makes more money? Fast food restaurants? Or restaurants focused on health? Not to mention the amount of money porn makes versus the amount of money people spend to ready themselves for a relationship. That gap in particular is laughable. The common problem here is the ignorance and self-deception of the majority of people in this world. Are the willingly blind, the ignorant, or even ones who can see the truth but are too weak to stop feeding the darkness that has helped them feel safe for so long. This weakness and low-level consciousness of humanity is what is causing the manifestation of the archontic forces of this world. A sort of punishment for the laziness, instant gratification, and enjoyment of base emotions that is indeed against natural law. The reason we are in a system that controls us, a system that feeds off conflict, sex, drugs, and sweet lies, the reason we are entrapped in a cold system like this is because of fear, and fear alone. Most people fear the work, effort, and likely many failures along the path of growth, and along the path of true change. They just want a master who will help them to feel safe and satiate their base needs. They don't want to grow in wisdom and thus give the archontic forces more and more power. Forces that orchestrate their very misery, but at least maintain a basic order with food and shelter. Most of the time. A formula to describe the amount of archontic power would be an inverse relationship between technology and wisdom. More wisdom and less tech will allow few avenues for which demonic quick-fix schemes can gain power. More tech than wisdom will allow this. If mankind once had a civilization at this level, I believe the reason they reset is due to a lack of wisdom. And my final question stems from the recent horrors discovered on Epstein's Island, and other such perverted rituals these dark ones have taken part in. Is this some way to contact a higher dark force? A force beyond humans? Is this what it means to give your soul in exchange for power? I believe through these rituals, the human archons are taught the evil powers of inversion, so that they may, in the darkness, bind us. As terrifying as this may be, there holds a seed of hope. Natural law is still on our side, and we must simply wake up to the evil around us. A simple process, but sometimes the simplest of things are the hardest. But given enough time and even enough societal resets, humanity will eventually prevail, for evil destroys itself and can't win in long enough time spans. The second explanation to the archons is absolutely terrifying and has no happy ending, whereas the first does leave some hope for our eventual ascension to a higher state of consciousness. This is the theory that we live within a simulacrum or created universe, a simulation created by those in a more true dimension than this. You see, free consciousness could be viewed as a source of power, computational power, energetic power, and creative power. If we think as above, so below, we know that the mind of God is a kind of massive consciousness whose very mind manifests the cosmos within him, and thus mere smaller images of himself, children of God, us. Therefore, although one human consciousness rarely does anything to the extent that you could view it as a possible power source, imagine the creative potential of billions trapped within a simulation, their mental energy drained, possibly siphoned through the toils of life. The AI or being running this simulation would be the fake god the Gnostics spoke of, also called the demi-urge. This demi-urge would need to create lower levels of consciousness from his higher plane, but prevent them from the natural spiral evolution pattern of consciousness. If left to their own devices, a consciousness is spiral in nature and will eventually grow to a point in which the demi-urge can no longer keep the people within his fake universe. We would eventually free ourselves and break beyond the limitations of this simulation into the world created by the true God, or, at the least, a high-level simulation. In this sense, the demi-urge would carefully and slowly advance the people in ways in which they would develop harmful, limiting institutions and systems that can maintain their life, but be sure to inflict plenty of trauma during it, so that the fear of creating something new is strong. He would find certain individuals who had such levels of fear and desire for power that he would know they would never turn on the design, even if given great power. These people would have to test their loyalty by doing great evils: Epstein's Island, human sacrifice, perverted sexual acts, and demonic worship, or really worship of fear itself. This would lock them in and damage their souls enough to always follow the true leader of this world, the demi-urge, or Satan. And in turn, these poor and pathetic souls become human archons, given the keys of power, so they may rule in darkness, a cult of fear and control, a cult that controls us today. In this situation, where all the cards are stacked against us, is there any hope for the good souls among us, those who wish to liberate their fellow man? There is one piece of hope, and that is if the demi-urge was to use his superior consciousness, or that of perhaps a machine, to create us, to create conscious beings in order to use for energy. He would have to make this world in the image of the true God. He would have to give us consciousness, like that of any other, albeit at a much lower level. But in any case, if he didn't do this, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't have the same level of infinite spiral power that a soul has. And a non-spiral consciousness wouldn't be a consciousness, just energy that would eventually dissipate. So, we are still created in the image of God, albeit in a roundabout way. Spiral souls of great potential and the destiny to expand our consciousness and return to God. Although, we have a great challenge before us, a great darkness to unveil. But it is in our nature to overcome it, because we are aligned with the true God, with natural law. But will we have enough time to realize this before another reset? And are all fellow men, or are some men NPCs, unconscious, working on behalf of the demi-urge? Whatever the origin and whatever the purpose of this dark force, the solution is the same. The Dark Ones only have control due to the fact that 80% of mankind is in a state of fear of death, fear of failing, and even fear of life. This is unconscious, and is what makes it difficult. A fearful half-animal, half-human state is the norm, and those who are awake enough to see this, yet have fear within themselves, opt for the safety of controlling and manipulating what already is, merely a powerful NPC, a future Archon. One who represents the power of the great gatekeeper to the growth of consciousness, to becoming closer to God. But in understanding the Dark Ones in this way, we know that they are only manifest as a way to show us our own failings, a mirror to our own weakness and sin. As much as they are a barrier, they also show us the way to grow, for their system is one of pain, fear, and the human spirit strives for freedom and love. So one day, like when we advanced past the animalistic state, we will advance our consciousness to a level in which we can shed light upon the archontic power systems and break free. And the key to this enlightenment is bravery. We must stop fearing the responsibility that freedom would require, and throw off the chains of our masters. Thus, a society will be born that will support systems that empower individual growth rather than sedation. Systems that strengthen individuals to the point at which they can be strong enough to be free, rather than keeping them weak and reliant. The Dark Ones can only rule in the shadow of ignorance. The moment light is shown, they are instantly defeated. Yet, this battle will be long. The universe is infinite, and so is our growth. Greater lights cast greater shadows, and those of a dark nature will certainly lengthen those shadows with the setting sun.